You know when you make plans and the universe is like, nah, that's cute. Yeah, that's what happened to me this year. I'm generally not one of these kind of like word of the year or theme of the year sort of people, but last year this phrase kept coming into my head and I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna run with that. So I'm gonna talk about what it was, how the universe decided, nah, and what my word of the year slash theme of the year is for 2024. It's gonna be a chatty one, folks. I thought I should have like a mug of something. You know, everyone does those coffee chats. I don't like coffee. I don't drink any hot drinks at all. I'm one of those people who thinks that drinks should be cool and refreshing. So I don't have that, but I did bring Hermes here. I named my plants, yes. Hermes is here, so you have something pretty to look at. I did consider doing trifle talk because I was like, what's my thing? Like, I don't drink coffee. My thing is strawberry trifle. But I'm not just gonna sit here with like a big bowl of trifle and eat while I'm talking. So yeah, you get me, you get a plant. Good luck to you. Let's go. How's it going? It's Laura. I'm in a silly mood. You may have guessed, but my phrase of the year for 2023 was full hands, full heart. And the whole idea behind this was, number one, the full hands idea. It kind of comes from waitressing. If you've ever waitressed, you'll probably know that the full hands thing, like don't walk around with empty hands. You should always be carrying something, whether it's plates out to your guests or taking away dirty plates or putting out utensils, napkins, menus, all of that sort of stuff. And the whole idea is that you are kind of constantly, not constantly busy, but you are doing something to improve. And I kind of got this idea again, like it came back to me. I used to be a waitress many years ago. First job, hated it. But it came back to me many years later when I kind of dove into decluttering, because there's this whole idea of, you know, when you leave a space, take something with you. Don't leave empty-handed, so that as you're going about your natural, normal day, you're tidying up as you go. It takes pretty much zero extra effort. And I did find that very helpful, particularly during those times when my home seemed to be getting out of hand. I would just focus on bringing things with me as I left a room. And it was also this time that I was picking up trash as I was out walking the dog. And that kind of, so the whole kind of like full hands thing really spoke to me. I was like, yes, I am going to, you know, make the planet a better place by picking up after myself. I'm going to make my home a better, more comfortable place to live by, again, picking up after myself. And just, yeah, not constantly being busy, but making sure that I was leaving a space, my home, the planet, better than when I arrived. The full heart thing then was really about wanting to strengthen relationships. You know, like my family are back in Ireland, my friends are back in Ireland, and yes, I do have some friends here and now, but they're not, you know, they're kind of like not short-term friends, as in I haven't had them for very long because we've only lived here for 6 years. So I really wanted to make a huge effort to you know, maintain the friendships and relationships that I already had, and also kind of nurture some new ones. I have to say though, this is a hard one for me, because number one, it takes, as an introvert, it takes a lot for me to put myself out there and, you know, try and strike up a conversation with someone. And I've done it a few times in the past few years and like not been rebuffed or anything, not been outright rejected, but I can just tell that the other person is not as interested as I am. So I might, you know, meet somebody, maybe even like exchange phone numbers or whatever, and then I might text them and say, you know, hey, do you want to meet up for a coffee or something? And I would just never hear back. So yeah, that's how I started last year. The full hands, full heart, leaving a place better than I found it, and nurturing the friendships and relationships in my life, and maybe, you know, starting some new ones, even not relationships, happy with my husband, but friendships. Now, I won't say that it's, you know, a situation that didn't work out for me. It did, but actually the biggest thing that happened to me in 2023 in terms of theme, I would say, or, you know, an overarching message or lesson that I learned was actually about acceptance, and, you know, as a kind of subcategory of that, forgiveness. So I don't know how or why it happened, but for context, if you haven't followed me for a while or you don't know my story, my backstory, I suffered from postnatal depression after my daughter was born, and it was just a really awful time. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I'm sure you understand if you've ever gone through any sort of depression or anything like that. You know, my daughter's 10 now, and even though I'm over the worst of it, I still held a lot of not resentment, that's not the right word, like anger, frustration about that whole time. Like resentment, not towards my daughter, not really towards myself, but towards the universe for robbing me of what should have been a wonderful, joyful time. You know, those first few years with my daughter were really difficult for me, and I couldn't enjoy them, and I didn't enjoy them. And obviously I still love her, but myself, I was not in a good place. So it was obviously just not a good time. Let's just leave it at that. And I've really struggled with that for the past decade. Like I've really had a lot of anger built up inside me about it, about how I wasted those precious years. Not that I wasted them, but they were wasted in a sense. That's certainly how I felt. And then for some reason this year, again, like I said, I don't know how it happened. I don't really know why it happened, or, you know, there's nothing necessarily that triggered it or anything. But at some point during this year, I looked at my daughter and I thought, it's okay. I'm able to let it go now. I don't know why, you know, all of that anger, all of that disappointment at missing out on certain things, or, you know, not having felt a certain way, I let it go. I had this moment of acceptance where I just felt, you know, look, it's happened and I can't turn the clock back, and, you know, everything worked out okay in the end. She's here, she's happy, she's healthy, I am happy and now healthy. So yeah, I just had this moment where I was like, I made my peace with it. A very strange experience. But also then there have been other instances. I feel like this year I've made my peace with a lot of things, and it's been really cathartic, but something that I didn't set out to do. So something happened during the year. I'm not going to go into details, but somebody reminded me of something from my past, just like a stupid thing I had done, you know, like a mistake I had made, something that I regretted. Honestly, I had completely forgotten about it until they reminded me. You know, my brain had just blocked it out. But I think we've all done ridiculous things, you know, when we were younger, and not even like necessarily when we were young, but just things we did in our past that if we could turn the clock back, we wouldn't do those things again. And they can be like big things, life-changing things, to even just small things, you know, like we said something hurtful to somebody. Or an example from my own life would be that I haven't always spoken up in situations where I should have. You know, when somebody needed defending or something needed to be said and I didn't say it, and I felt cowardly afterwards. And that's something that I've held with me. You know, there was one particular example where there was a man, like a fully grown man, who was shouting at and berating a teenage girl. And I stood by and I watched this and I didn't intervene. I kind of like, not entirely true in the sense that I was about to intervene, but by the time I actually kind of had processed everything, it had all blown over. Kind of, I should have stepped in much sooner and told him to cop on. And there have been other instances of that. Like there was another incident where there was like a conversation being had. I was part of a group, and somebody who was talking in the group said something that I thought was homophobic, and it kind of took me completely by surprise because it came completely out of the blue and it was just randomly dropped into a conversation. And I'm one of these people, it takes me a long time to process something. Like I am not one of these quick thinkers. I am not one of these like quick reaction people. It takes me a long time to process things, particularly emotional things. I am a very emotional person, and I feel emotions strongly, and it takes me a long time to properly process them and get over them. And I've said this to my husband. I'm like, if I'm ever annoyed about something, leave me to it, because I'll wake up the next morning and I'll feel totally fine about it. But in the moment, I definitely make mountains out of molehills, but it's just because I process at a slower rate than a lot of other people. So when I heard this, my brain started processing. My initial reaction was, did I just hear what I think I heard? Like, no, he can't have said what I thought he just said, because he dropped it in that conversation so casually. And this was going round and round my head. And by the time like my brain had kind of caught up and I had understood that, yes, that did actually happen, and I was about to say something, the conversation had naturally like dissipated. People were going about their regular business. Everyone was kind of like saying their goodbyes and stuff. And I stood there again, feeling bad that I hadn't spoken up. Anyway, so many different examples of that in my life, and just general ridiculous, idiotic, immature things that I did. And like I said, somebody reminded me recently of something that I did many, many years ago. And, you know, if I could take it back, I would. But I let it bother me for a while, like a short while. And then all of a sudden, kind of like with the whole postnatal depression thing, I felt this like forgiveness come over me. I was like, you know what, Laura, you were younger, you were, you know, more immature, you didn't know any better, basically. You're older now, you're wiser, you are more mature in some respects, and you wouldn't make that mistake again. Like, yes, if you could turn back the clock, would you change it? Yes, I would. Do I regret it? Yes, I do. But I can't change it. Again, it's one of those things I can't change. And yeah, I felt this overwhelming sense of forgiveness. Like, I forgive myself for doing something. And maybe I should have known better, but I didn't. I didn't know better at the time. And yeah, it's just one of those things that I normally would have beaten myself up over, you know, for months and maybe years to come. But for some reason this year, I thought, no, this is another thing that I can just let go. I can make my peace with it. I forgive myself, and I forgive the other person who brought it up, because I do not need to be reminded of that. Yeah, it's been this really weird, cathartic, healing experience. And again, not something that I actively set out to do at all. And I don't know what prompted it. I don't know where it came from. But for some reason, this year has been a year of healing, physically as well as kind of mentally and emotionally. You know, like my chronic pain is starting to be manageable now. I think I have it under control for the most part. So yes, I would say it's a year of healing, acceptance, forgiveness, and a year of peace. And while I did not set out to achieve that, I'm very, very glad that I did. That brings me to my word or theme for the next year. But I would like to hear, like, was there something that stood out for you this year? Like, was there this overarching theme, and was it kind of in alignment with the plans that you had for this year? Like, did the year work out basically the way you thought it would? And if not, what direction did it take for you? Mine was unexpectedly wonderful. I don't know, maybe it's because my dad had an organ transplant, you know, early on in the year, and something like that definitely helps to put things into perspective. So maybe that was kind of the catalyst for it. Maybe that's what kicked off everything. But yeah, that's my story for this year. 2024 then, let's see if this one works out. So it probably won't. Knowing the universe, all the experience that I now have, I know that things don't always work out according to plan. But again, this word kept coming up over and over again, so I'm just going to run with it. The word for me for next year is pause. I always try and live this kind of slow-paced, intentional life, and I've actually had this kind of friction between wanting to live this slower paced life, this really intentional life, but also wanting to live an exciting, vibrant life. And I've felt like the tension between the two of those, like, how can I reconcile the two of those seemingly completely different notions? And this year, this word pause kept coming into my head. And the whole idea is that before I do something, or just kind of in the middle of doing something, in the middle of living my everyday life, I just want to pause and ask myself, is this what I want to be doing? Is this fulfilling for me? Is this satisfying for me? Is this where I see myself going? Like, is this the path that I see myself taking? Is this the direction that I want to be facing? It's simply about taking a moment on a regular basis to do this kind of like little mental check-in with myself to ensure that I'm not racing through life. I find, particularly with work, it's very easy to get on this hamster wheel of churning out content and going through the motions and replying to emails and comments and recording videos and editing videos and all of that sort of stuff. And I tell myself all the time, like, okay, I'm not going to put out content unless I'm really, really happy with it. So I'm going to allow myself to have a more easy, relaxed schedule. And then I get back into that, no, I have to churn out a video like every Thursday. And it just, I constantly get pulled back into that crazy cycle of just create. And I don't think I ever churn out content that I'm not happy with, but I certainly churn out content at a rate that doesn't necessarily align with the slower paced life that I would like. So that's kind of the work side of things. But even from a personal side, sometimes I find that I do things very mindlessly. Like, I'm sure all of us can relate to this, but like scrolling on social media, I've made a conscious effort even the last few days to really cut back on that. But there are certain things that I can do without thinking. Even eating. Eating is a big one. Just snacking on things and then feeling terrible afterwards because I ate too much, and generally too much of a bad thing. So I don't feel good afterwards. So yeah, it's all about pausing. Just taking a moment before starting into something or even in the middle of doing something and asking myself, is this what I want to be doing? Do I enjoy the pace of this? Am I rushing and racing for no reason? Am I enjoying this process? Do I think this is valuable or satisfying or fulfilling in some way? Is it adding value to my life, or is it simply me going through the motions? So that's where I'm at, but I do think the universe will turn around and be like, no, this is going to be your busiest year yet. I think it's just going to throw all the things at me. Let's lay plans and all that jazz. If you want to see how I'm prepping for the new year, how I'm planning to live this slower, more intentional, more pauseful life, I will link that video for you right here. I just shared kind of all the things I do to set myself up for the new year, give myself a good head start. I'd love to know what your word or theme of the year is/was, lessons that you've learned. Drop those in the comments, and until next time, go raibh míle maith agaibh. Agus figé mé sibh go luath. Slán!